Good morning, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. Believe it or not, we're at episode 80, and we're joined by a three-time guest, Margaret Kimberley. You know who she is now. She joined us in episode 4 and episode 39. I encourage my audience to go back and watch those episodes 4 and 39, and you're only going to learn more from that. Margaret Kimberley is the co-founder, one of the co-founders of Black Agenda Report, alongside Bruce Dixon and Glen, who we're going to talk about some today, and his book, The Black Agenda, that was published. She's also the author of Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents. I have a curious question to ask about that book. I believe it was published in 2020, but I think it's a very important book in the context of what we're talking about when we talk about the Black political struggle and the Black misleadership class, which is a Black Agenda Report exclusive term. And she's also the executive editor of Black Agenda Report and a senior columnist. And I just want to say our audience and I are super excited to have you back on, and welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much. It's great to be back.
It is, yes. Thank you so much for coming on. We have a lot to discuss today within this hour. But before we get into the discussion, I just want to give a brief advertisement and say that my channel is officially monetized. Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum on YouTube is officially monetized. I knew that once the audience grew enough, we would get to that goal. But I just want to say within this 15 months of launching this Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum after my PhD program, we've reached over 160 plus countries. We've also reached all 50 states. And we continue to have guests from all over the world, domestically, internationally. We have an audience outreach right now. 43% of our audience is located outside of the United States. So that was always the point of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum, is to make it an international community forum. You can't talk about political issues without geopolitical influences, international outlook. And I think that's a lack of the US populace. I think the step further that we need to take is to think of things outside of the United States. Everything can't be US centered. So you can't understand the US without understanding the rest of the world. And so, again, I want to say thanks to all my audience members. I'm not going to put you guys behind a paywall or anything. You want to send money to me, I'm not going to say no to it. But this is always going to be a free forum. Everything's going to be no paywalls. Everything's going to be transparent and upfront. But again, we're not going to say no to a donation or two if you want to send us money. I guess my first question for Margaret would be, it's been a while since we talked, but I know you've been following the Israel-Palestine. This situation is just, it's a dire situation. I have an interesting thought process about it. I don't want to belittle the situation, but this has been going on for a very long time. And I can only think of the summer of 2020 with all the protests with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Police brutality is not a new issue, and so is this situation is no different. The Israeli occupation of Palestine, the routine bombardments. We've had Norm Finkelstein come on to discuss this. We've had other people that give this voice of Palestine that's kind of pushed out of the media. But we just got confronted recently with a Congress that basically said that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, equating the two together. What are we to make of this issue, Margaret? Is this going to be drug out into the 2024 election and used as some kind of a tool against the people? Because I already see the people on the ground have a difference of opinion versus the Congress, who's completely captured by AIPAC and all the Israeli lobbies in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Excuse me. It's great to be back. This is a huge issue. Yes, it is going to go into the election year, which, by the way, is hard upon us. The Iowa caucuses are like in 6 weeks. They're in January. So the campaign season is here. I think Biden's embrace of Israel, the unconditional support, the frankly phony claims that, well, we've told them not to hit civilians. It's not true. I believe Netanyahu and Biden are on the same page. I don't think Netanyahu had to convince Biden of anything. Biden has been a hawk all his He has a record behind him. He first became a senator in the early 70s. So he's been a player in Washington for 50 years. He was a senator for many years before he was Obama's vice president and then president himself. One of the reasons it's thought that Obama chose him is that he had such close ties with Israel, was such a strong supporter of Israel, the unconditional support variety. So Israel is doing whatever Biden allows them to do, and I don't believe they're twisting his arm. This issue does go back a long way. It goes back to the era of European colonialism. First, what's now Palestine was under the control of the Ottoman Turks, who were on the losing side in World War I. And it became a British colony. And now, as a colony, Britain didn't have the right to give it to anyone. So there's the now famous or infamous Balfour Declaration, where a British diplomat told one of the Rothschilds we were going to have a Jewish state there, but it wasn't Britain's to give. It was the property of the Palestinian people. But Israel holds this special place as an outpost of U.S. imperialism in the region. And ever since it was founded in the late 40s, 48, it began with ethnic cleansing, with the Nakba, driving Palestinians out of the new country, some atrocities taking place. So this is a long, as you say, a long story. But I just wanted to point out that part of the history. It is a colonizing state. And it is an apartheid state, and I don't care if that offends people. People who lived under South African apartheid have visited Israel and said, yes, this looks familiar. We have the occupied territories of the West Bank and Gaza sealed off by a wall that's twice as high as the Berlin Wall. Remember all those decades we were told the Berlin Wall separating East from West in Berlin was the epitome of a human rights violation. We have the occupied territories being sealed off from other people, always under attack. The West Bank, settlers on the West Bank they're mobs, frankly. I don't know any other word to use, who are driving out Palestinians, causing them to abandon their towns. People have been killed. Gaza has been the target of Israel before. So ever since October 7th, with Hamas was elected by the people of Gaza, but it's been like 16 years ago. So it's a while ago. Mm-hmm. They got angry because it wasn't what they wanted, but at any rate, Hamas military forces attacked Israel, took hostages, and Israel has proceeded to kill 20 times as many people as Hamas killed. Hamas, the number now is 1,200, I think, is the agreed upon number. But Israel's killed more than 20,000 people. It's a revenge killing spree. That's all it is. And there are questions about how those 1,200 people were killed, that Israel, many of them died in what's called friendly fire. We were told that Hamas deliberately set houses on fire and burned people alive. Well, people died because Israeli tanks fired indiscriminately. Now, you could say that it wouldn't have happened absent Hamas's action, and yes, that's true, but we should know the entire story. Mm-hmm. And if many people died as a result of Israeli actions, we should know that. But because this narrative that Hamas is just evil and they just hate Jews and they're like the Nazis, it's a false narrative, and it's used by the Biden administration, by the corporate media, to shut us up and to get our buy-in for what are war crimes, what is a genocide. And I want to say the terms war crime and genocide are defined. The Geneva Conventions, Fourth Geneva Conventions, Article 33, yes, I memorized it, spells out that collective punishment is a war crime. So if you say, well, Hamas killed Israelis, we're going to go and kill Palestinians and bomb their hospitals, that's a war crime. Collective punishment is a war crime. Punishing someone for what someone else did is a war crime. The United Nations defined genocide. It is basically an attack on a group of people meant to destroy them, or even meant to harm them. So I urge your listeners to look these things up. So these are war crimes. These are genocides. It is not hyperbole. We're talking about international law, which Israel and the U.S. Violate whenever they feel like it. So here we are now 2 months into this killing spree. They called it a humanitarian pause, which lasted for a few days. There were hostages exchanged, the Hamas hostages with some of the thousands of Palestinians who are imprisoned in Israel without charge or trial, some of whom are captured as kids. But Israel decided that they didn't want to do that anymore. What they want is to empty Gaza's population. They want to kill people, create terror. Why else would you attack hospitals? Psychological warfare. They have targeted journalists. Numerous Palestinian journalists, some have been killed with their entire families. They have been deliberately targeted. These are assassinations. So I think it's important for people to understand that. And you mentioned the House voting to say that the non-binding resolution that anti-Zionism is akin to anti-Semitism, and only one member voted no. A Republican, Massey from Kentucky, even Rashida Tlaib, who was censured for using the term from the river to the sea, even she voted present. She didn't vote no, as she should have. AIPAC they've said it. They are raising money to defeat anyone who even sounds a little bit progressive on Israel, who says we should have a ceasefire. They're being targeted for defeat. In Michigan, 2 candidates for a Senate seat have both said publicly they were offered $20 million in campaign funds if they agreed to drop out and instead challenge Rashida Tlaib. So this is where we are. We have, and I have to say something else. Most Americans want a change in U.S.-Israel policy. There's a spectrum of opinion there, but most people want something that they think of just being more even-handed. There are people who want a two-state solution. There are, I think admittedly, people who think the state of Israel shouldn't exist, but most Americans want something different. They do not want the U.S. to give billions of dollars to Israel to do whatever it wants, to commit war crimes, which makes us complicit. It makes us all complicit. This is not what people want, but the Zionist lobby is like every other lobby. It exists to make sure that the people do not get what they want. Sometimes people say they think they're defending AIPAC. They'll say, well, it's just like the other lobbies. And my response is yes, and that's the problem. They are. I mean, what are you trying to say? That they're no worse than big oil, who are killing the planet and doing it with our money, who get subsidies? That like they're no worse than big pharma, who are dedicated to making sure we don't have affordable health care? So we have a larger issue of democracy. And yes, I think people are just outraged by what they see. They do not, even if they don't believe Israel should exist, they also don't believe that Israel should be bombing hospitals. And I think this outrage is something that's I don't think it's going to go away quickly. I think it's having an impact on the election. It's having an impact on Biden's approval rating, which was already low, below 40%. And going lower. So those are my general thoughts on this situation.
And we appreciate your commentary. And I have some follow-up thought about it too. You mentioned AIPAC. American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, one of the largest, if not the largest, pro-Israel lobby in the United States in DC. You have other ones. You have the Anti-Defamation League, which is purported to be this Southern Poverty Law Center. I mean, I've called these organizations out so much on the forum. Um, I have an issue with any organization that dictates what's acceptable and what's not acceptable when we talk about free speech and free expression and stuff. I'm a free speech maximalist personally, and everyone may not agree with me when it comes to that, but it's like those things are going to exist regardless to whatever extreme you want to compare it to. There's always going to be Nazi-like people. There's always going to be people like us, you know, that I'd say that we bring people together. I don't think that you can section off entire groups of people. There are some bad apples in those groups, but for the most part, people who are anti-establishment don't like the system for a reason. And I've found that even talking about AIPAC, I've talked to a lot of Trump friends, a lot of Biden friends. Just obviously, we promote a lot of independent third parties on this forum. And when I talk to people, they don't believe that we should be giving money to a foreign country. Israel is not the United States. And this is something that's starting to resonate with people who I make the question, like, you realize that Trump is a big Israelite. You realize that, right? You realize that Biden's an Israelite, right? All these, it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on. And also, if you believe in separation of church and state, technically AIPAC is a religious lobby. So you have religion influencing the political system. And when you break things down to people, they're like, you know what? I never thought about it that way. And our money's just going away. I mean, just left and right, the money that we don't even have. $317.9 billion post-World War II, the most money we've given to any country in the world post-World War II, Israel. And this was at the end of 2022. Who knows how much more money we're going to give Israel between now and the next 10 years, since Obama re-signed Bush's continuous aid to Israel, just like all the other presidents, I think dating back to Jimmy Carter. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's already in our military budget to give money to Israel. But I don't know if you want to respond to that, but those are just kind of my thoughts that were going through my head based on what you were saying.
Right. Well, every president since Truman, who was president when
Oh God,
Israel,
this goes back that far. Oh
yes,
God.
it does, was founded. But you said a couple things. My biggest problem with AIPAC is that it should have to register as a foreign agent. We have a Foreign Agents Registration Act, and anytime they want to oppress someone, they're accused of being a foreign agent. AIPAC is an agent of a foreign government, and it should be registered as such. If they want to advocate for Israel, they can, but they're a foreign agent, and that is what they ought to be. Excuse me, it ought to be an official designation. And I forgot what else I was going to say. You know, it's we talked about the power of this particular lobby, but I think we also have to talk about their impact on corporate media, which is where most people still get their information. They basically repeat the pro-Israel narrative. Even the allegedly liberal media like MSNBC, which is just a Democratic Party talk shop. I mean, they don't even have a show where they got rid of two of their Muslim hosts, Ali Velshi and Mehdi Hassan, who are still employed but have lost their shows. Who made very mild criticisms of Israel, but apparently that's not allowed. Only the official narrative can be allowed on corporate media. And so we have this constant brainwashing, but it doesn't work as well as it used to. And that's why there's so much protest. You know, you can't call everybody, you know, if you call everybody an anti-Semite, then the word doesn't mean anything anymore. If just criticizing Israel makes you an anti-Semite, well, half the country's anti-Semitic. And someone said, and I would credit the person if I could remember who said it, an anti-Semite used to be someone who didn't like Jews. Now it's someone that Jews don't like. And so no one's afraid. People have lost their fear of being called anti-Semitic if just sometimes just asking a question. The ADL is very problematic. They claim there's this huge increase in anti-Semitic incidents, 300% increase. And you look at their figures, and basically they're calling any protest anti-Semitic.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be skeptical of these numbers. I would like to know, well, what are these incidents? The biggest victims of hate crime, bias crimes, are still Black people, more so than anybody else. That's still the case. But so we have these very powerful interests. They do, like other lobbies, dictate what does and doesn't happen in Congress. Now they spread war propaganda. The latest thing is that there were mass rapes on October 7th. Now, this is something that can't be ignored, shouldn't be ignored, should be investigated, independently investigated, I might add, and not just keep ramping up war propaganda. The evidence is thin, if not non-existent. There's just a repetition of stories that this happened, but there's no evidence. So, for example, it started with the beheaded babies, and Joe Biden, to his eternal shame, was one of the people who spread that. There were beheaded babies on October 7th. I've seen confirmation. Well, that was just a lie, and his own people had to walk it back, but he repeated it again. So now he is on this. There were mass rapes, there was sexual violence, and we've heard this every time they went by. I call it atrocity porn. They did it against Libya, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama in 2011. Gaddafi was giving his troops Viagra, and there were going to be mass rapes. And there she is back again with her shameless self, repeating this same trope about Hamas. The evidence is very, very thin. The people making these charges are largely connected to the Israeli government. I think it does warrant investigation, but it has to be independent. And we can't just repeat what the Israeli government says, who are trying to win sympathy and buy-in from the American people in an effort to try and stop this protest, which is not going to go away as long as they are deliberately targeting civilians, and that's what they are doing.
I just wanted to plug in two books that I think are crucial to the Gaza struggle, especially the Gaza struggle. Norm Finkelstein's book, An Inquest into Its Martyrdom, which is entitled Gaza, and that's the subtitle, An Inquest into Its Martyrdom, and Sarah Roy's book, Unsilencing Gaza. It's crazy because I know we follow a lot of the same people, and some of my audience wasn't too happy about Norm's book about I'll Burn the Bridge, but it seems like he came back into good graces of a lot of people with this issue coming back up. But I think those two books are worth reading for sure. And it's really just a sad situation. Again, just how the weaponization of anything, any critique of Israel, just automatically you're tagged with these labels. I mean, and a lot of times, I mean, it's crazy. A lot of the people now, like on the progressive side, I mean, I don't even use that term really anymore, but just for the audience, they know what I mean when I say progressive side. You used it too, I think, earlier. These progressive minded people, I mean, a lot of these Jews are called anti Semitic. So the Jews that don't like the Jews that are speaking out against the atrocities against Palestine, or all of a sudden they're anti-Semitic. So it's crazy. But my question was kind of going into the article you published about 9/11, and I guess what what is the parallel between just this scary use of authority whenever the government seems fit, and you have this situation now with just any sort of critique of it is anti-Semitism, and then you have the intersectionality between the Black struggle and the Palestinian struggle, and how Blacks view Israel. Just by default, if people are going to have views about Palestine, they're going to have views about Israel. How can you see this possible being weaponized against Black people or people in general, based on your article about the Patriot Act?
Patriot Act passed immediately after September 11th. Hold on, sorry. I'm getting some sunlight. Okay, better. A few days after September 11th, Congress was stampeded into passing this law, which curtails our speech, which allows the government to surveil us in ways that previously were illegal. And it was all supposed to be temporary. Do you remember that? And
Hmm.
20 years later, it keeps being renewed. And so it's like the temporary tax cuts for rich people. They never never disappear. Um, but as far as you're right, there's a large group, Jewish Voice for Peace. They've had huge demonstrations around the country. Here in New York, they took over Grand Central Station. The police closed down Grand Central Station, which they did not need to do. Um, but they and people like that are vilified as also being self-hating Jews, and who are sometimes called anti-Semites themselves. Um, and Black people are vilified for a different reason. And I wrote an article today in Black Agenda report about this issue of Jewish people, pointing out most infamously the actress Juliana Margulies recently, but even Senator Charles Schumer, the senior senator in New York here in our state, and the majority leader, gave this speech on the Senate floor about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is increasing, he said. It's a five-alarm fire, but nobody cares except Jews and people who we supported in the past. Black Lives Matter. These people are, and he named other struggles, who are not on our side, as if there's some kind of quid pro quo. So from now, I tell everybody, listen, if you are supporting a Black struggle because you want Black people to go along with something you want, just say so in the beginning, because then we can just say no, thank you. But Margulies said the quiet part out loud. Jews marched with Black people. Why don't Black people support us? These young kids, they're brainwashed into hating all the Jews. This is an old trope. Um, Schumer, being a senator, did not put it so inelegantly, but Black people have a right to say anything we want about Israel, about any subject. We choose our allies. We choose who we are in solidarity with. And if we are in solidarity with Palestinian people, well, and somebody else doesn't like it, well, that's just too bad. Um, and the other thing, especially with Black people, we are especially targeted and charged with being anti-Semitic. The entertainer, Jamie Foxx, he tweeted something about fake friends, and it said something about they killed Jesus. Well, meaning, and as in the way I understood it, there are people who will betray you. Well, it was turned into anti-Semitic. He was forced to apologize, and this was just a few months ago. So that's where we are. That we are, when it's convenient, people will compare their struggle to that of Black people, but when somebody else wants to make the case for themselves, they immediately point to us, and we are pressured to say what other people, and in this case, Jewish people, want us to say. Nobody's going for that anymore, except, cowardly bought off politicians and other people who should be ignored at any case. But our friends are whoever we say they are. And Black people will almost always be in solidarity with other oppressed people around the world. That is a big problem for some. But it's important. You touched on this earlier about the need to advocate internationally as well as domestically. You can't. Malcolm X said, and I'm paraphrasing, I know I'm going to mess this up. He said, you can't understand Congo if you don't understand Mississippi. You can't understand Mississippi if you don't understand the Congo, because it's the same forces that are oppressing people. And that is still true. You can't have, police departments in this country. They send cops to Israel to train police. To train them in what? to train them in apartheid, to train them in extrajudicial killing. So we have a right and an obligation to speak up about any subject we want, anywhere we want. And if Chuck Schumer or an actress don't like it, it's just too bad for them.
Yes, there's so much you mentioned there about Black people, especially, but it kind of reading this the Black Agenda by Glen Ford, it causes like so many different, I guess, conflicting views because like what Black people are we talking about? Because politics is such a complicated subject because blocks of people aren't really they're not in solidarity together a lot of times in politics. Even though they may feel it inside, they don't necessarily reflect that in the voting method or whatever they choose, or they may not say it. I believe that there is an overall solidarity with people in Palestine with Black people, but I don't think it's understood to be outwardly vocal. I'm not talking about the activist circles. I'm talking about I guess mid-level like professionals, people who you would see at a 9 to 5 job, people who you see in academia who aren't necessarily in the streets. I think a lot of those people, I won't say that they're tamed, but maybe they're so caught up in their everyday life that they don't verbally express things the way we do it. And I'm wondering why that is, because I think that kind of goes, I believe those people are caught in between the people that Glenn Forward describing about the Black misleadership class, because those are the people who are the figureheads in political power, as opposed to Black people who are basically being led astray either way. Like, I think it's a tough situation, but that's what your commentary kind of made me think of when you said that.
I keep on muting. There's a lot of noise outside. Uh, um, the Glen's book, called The Black Agenda, it was published posthumously. Glen passed away in July 2021. The book was a collection of his best essays, was published shortly thereafter. Everyone should get The Black Agenda, published by Or Books. Um, and I lost my thought about what, oh, yes. So you said a lot there, but I wanted to focus on what you said about people being aware and being involved. I think one of the things that has changed is we are inundated with media, with electronic media. I mean, that's how we're talking to each other right now, right? But I feel like it has it's information, but it's entertainment, but there's been media consolidation thanks to Bill Clinton, or rather no thanks to Bill Clinton, where you have there's 6 corporations that determine most of what we see and hear and listen to. So there's media proliferation, but politically it gives the same message. And the Black misleadership class that you referred to is now bought off. There was a time when, the Black Caucus used to be called the conscience of the Congress. And they were left alone pretty much. But, in the effort to, they realized there was trying to get Black people to be more politically conservative was a loser. They'd get Black people to run as Republicans or something, and it was always a flop. They decided, well, let's just buy off Black politicians too. So they did not leave them alone anymore. They used money to put people in office, to take people out of office. Cynthia McKinney, who was a representative in Georgia. There was a representative in Alabama whose name is Earl Hilliard, who were pushed out by the Zionist lobby, and that message wasn't lost on the rest of them. They now get huge campaign contributions from Big Pharma and the military-industrial complex, and James Clyburn of South Carolina, this alleged Black leader, gets more money from Big Pharma than any other, at least it was true as of a couple of years ago, more money from Big Pharma than any other member of Congress. And he is the House Minority Whip. There's a House The minority leader is a Black congressman from Brooklyn, Hakeem Jeffries. But you get that job because you promised to toe the line. You get that job because you promise that you're not going to shake things up. So we have people who the liberation movement was crushed. This congressional representation, which we used to have, we don't have anymore. It's a black face in a high place, and unfortunately, that still carries weight with too many people. Even after Obama, where a black person had the highest political office in the land, but um, uh, consciously did not do anything for Black people as a group. Whenever he was asked about Black unemployment or anything, he'd just say, rising tide lifts all boats. I'm everybody's president. And people would defend him. Well, what do you expect? He can't just do something just for us. And my question is, well, what's the big deal about him being the president? Why do you care if he can't do anything for you? So my last memory of the Congressional Black Caucus actively speaking for Black people was in, I believe it was 2004, when the U.S. kidnapped the elected president of Haiti, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, and kidnapped him and sent him to the Central African Republic. And Colin Powell did that, talk about the black face in the high place, but members of the Congressional Black Caucus were the only ones to speak up against this, to speak up on behalf of Aristide. They were very public. My then Congressman Charles Rangel pretty much called Colin Powell a liar. But that's 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's my last memory of them. I mean, and if you look at their website, it's very interesting. The Black Caucus website, it basically doesn't say much. They don't even have a lot of press releases. They don't tweet very much. Mm-hmm. And I said to myself, well, I guess you're not doing very much. What do they have this corporate sponsored, annual legislative weekend, but it's corporate sponsored. So, you have as neoliberalism and austerity are strengthened. These people play an important part in supporting the system. So we have a Black misleadership class. It's not just elected officials, it's heads of organizations, it's Black people in media, as I wrote about last week, all who go along with the party line to get Black people to be quiet. And unfortunately, this does succeed. We need independent Black politics, and we do not have that. And we see the end result.
There's something I want to touch on because I mentioned the Black agenda with your dear friend Glen Ford, but there's a lot of overlap between your book, Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents, and reading his book dedicates a lot of attention to Obama, the failures of Black Lives Matter, which I don't know if we have time to get into that. I'm not really interested in that right now, the BLM stuff as of now. But it was very interesting because you said this before, even going back to the first episode, how much insight and foresight that Glen had. Like, you would think that you're reading this stuff like now, this was published this year. Like, how does he know all this stuff? But he was already seeing the future, like you said. I think even in the first episode, just a visionary. But can you explain to the audience, this may be confusing to a lot of people, because I know I have some liberals that follow this forum, a lot of personal friends that don't really have my politics or share them, but they support the channel, they follow the forum. Can you explain to those people who may not understand the deception of Obama, how is Obama anti-Black based on your book, Prejudential Black American Presidents?
Well, every president was anti-Black. I mean, Black people, when we have succeeded in advocating for our rights, it's always because of mass action. Even the supposed good presidents for Black people only acted when they were pushed. Obama, it was just the opposite. Black people stood down because, we can't let's give him a shot. Let's have a Black person there. And I remember when he first ran in 2008, and Hillary Clinton and her horrible husband Bill Clinton, they made such obvious racist appeals to people. Do you remember she said something about the good white people? I'm supported by the good white people, the good hardworking white people. Um, I there were even people on the left who should have been more critical. I think those racist appeals by Hillary Clinton, and by the right wing, even after he was elected, uh, kept a lot of people from really critiquing what he was doing. He didn't do anything different than other presidents do, and I think we have to understand who presidents work for. We have an oligarchy in this country. They're the ones, it's not just people talk about Russia or some other faraway place. They've got oligarchs. Well, hello. So do we here. And they are the ones, they choose the presidents. They bundle checks for the presidents. Democrats will always raise $1 billion to get someone in the White House. Where do you think most of that money comes from? Obama was marketed as this movement and marketed as someone who depended on small donations. No, 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 no. And that's what he did. He was marketed. It was a thing of beauty, I guess, evil beauty, and as it were. But that it was a movement, and that he was a progressive and he was anti-war when he was none of those things. He went on the, casting couch to the rich people and they gave him money to be president. Even what's called Obamacare is mostly enshrines the privatized healthcare system. You should call it Nixon care. Actually, it's what Nixon proposed back in the 70s. The best thing about it, the best thing about it, though, was the Medicaid expansion, which unfortunately many states have still not accepted, which gave low-income people greater access to Medicaid. That was, in my opinion, the best thing about Obamacare. The rest of it is you have the right to buy insurance, which you probably can't afford. And if you get really sick, doesn't even cover like the usual insurance. But that's still the one thing, throughout his term, it's like, but Obamacare, if you said anything about him. But so he was the same kind of president that we always had, and in the absence of real popular mobilization, he did what the oligarchs wanted him to do. And then what did we get? In with Biden, and I remember when Biden's election, it was a few days after Election Day, and the press said that he had enough electoral votes to become president. There was celebration. I mean, here in New York, people literally celebrated in the streets that Joe Biden was president, forgetting many things. Among others, he said at a fundraiser, he promised these, the fat cats who, the ones who determine who the president will be. He said, nothing will fundamentally change. And that's what we've gotten. So what have we gotten with Biden, who claims to be a pro-union president? Well, he crushed the railroad workers' strike. Mm-hmm. So he'll do the cosmetic thing and go on a picket line with United Auto Workers. But when it was a real strike, the railroad workers' strike, he and the rest of Congress, it was a bipartisan effort, crushed that strike. And that's who we have. We have the man who's given billions of dollars to Israel, billions of dollars for Ukraine. And let me just say, digress a bit here and talk about what's going on in Ukraine. Ukraine is now conscripting young women and older men. It's a wrap. It's over. Ukraine cannot push Russia out of its territory. We know for a fact Ukraine and Russia were meeting to try to resolve their dispute. The U.S. scuttled the talks, told Zelensky, don't make any deals with Russia. We'll just give you a lot of money and weapons. And they did. The EU are literally out of weapons. The U.S. is scrounging the world, trying to pressure countries to give weapons to Ukraine. Now Biden can't get this latest allocation through. I'm sure they'll work something out, but Republicans initially are saying no. They claim they want it for the border, to stop immigration at the border, but they have to make up something because the entire thing was bipartisan. So that's what we've gotten. And, Israel and Ukraine, these are countries, they are wholly owned subsidiaries of the U.S. So people in Israel, whatever they have in Israel, they have from us on our dime. So people in Israel have a national healthcare system. They've got free healthcare, but we don't.
Hmm.
Ukraine, they've got a national healthcare system. We don't. The US is completely funding their government, all of their government's activities. And what are we told? You can't have free healthcare. You can't have student loan debt relief. We couldn't even get $600 more. Remember Biden campaigning $2,000 as if that was a lot of money in stimulus checks. Then it was 1,400. It was like, well, you got 600, and 600 plus 1,400 is 2,000. So you actually got your $2,000. Um, and that's, we get more austerity, and austerity, as Glen Ford often said, was not just about less spending of government money. It was a plan to immiserate the people, to make life so precarious that people would be weakened politically and would be less likely to protest. And those are the things that any Black president or congressional leader will be in favor of also. So I hope that experience with Obama, I hope people got that out of their system, a Black person having this or that job, because it really was a disaster for Black politics. And Black politics is not just about Black politicians. It's about having a politics that asserts our rights, that speaks for our needs. And that's something that unfortunately is at a low ebb right now.
Yes, there's so much more we could expand on with that. I'll just say this much, and going back to the when we talked about the Israeli lobby earlier, if my audience goes to opensecrets.org, opensecrets.org is a great site, and it just proves that a lot of this stuff. I mean, Margaret and I understand that the blue and the red alliance is an alliance. There's no difference between the two. They actually need each other, just like characters in a movie. I mean, one's the villain, one's the hero. Depending on the situation, they sell whatever they want to the public. Glen Ford mentioned the effective evil in the Democratic Party. Um, but if you look at the AIPAC money, that the politicians that are receiving the AIPAC money, there's is no coincidence that the top 20 recipients of AIPAC money, I think even if you go to last year's like funding, 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats. What a surprise. How shocking. If you look at these situations, you connect the dots. And so when people like to tag and say, Kiko, where are you getting these statistics and stuff from? They're on it. They're all over the place. It's like, but do you want to change your mind even if you get the empirical evidence? And that's the most frustrating thing with me. Just when I talk to other Black people about politics is I want to be optimistic that people are over it, but there's just so many people that are just like nostalgic about Obama. Um, it is basically what Glenn was saying, like how there's this mystique that somehow their situation was better before the crash of 0809, and then you still got people saying, gosh, I wish Obama was back in office. I'm saying to myself, are you fucking kidding? You wish he was back in? Like, you think your situation got better under him? But is it just the symbolism that's just so suffering and overpowering? It has to be, because there's nothing tangible that was better. The same stuff that they accused Trump of doing, which he does, the law and order president, the dog whistles, um, breaking up any sort of dissent towards the police or anything. Obama did that during Ferguson. He did all this stuff. He made these disastrous comments after Trayvon Martin was killed, basically saying like how Black dads need to be present, just all types of stuff, and no one checks him on it. But everyone wants to. Those same liberals would check a Republican on it, or someone that they don't like, but they won't check anyone within their own political class. It's very frustrating to see this stuff just over and over.
Well, and but as you point out, Obama engaged in racist dog whistles all the time. He gave a speech on Father's Day in 2008 in a Black church talking about how Black fathers are absent. I always felt he was talking about his own father who abandoned him. Uh, but anyway, that's something to work out with the psychologist and not to use against the rest of us. But so he would engage in these racist dog whistles. And the Trayvon Martin case, he was smart enough to know that Black people weren't going to stand for it. And he just said, well, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon Martin. Did he use the civil rights prosecutorial power that he had to prosecute Trayvon Martin's killer? No, he did not. They would drag out his mother and put her on display, and the mothers of these other people who were the many people killed by police in those cases that managed to make it through the media blackout. But there was no change. There was nothing. He was the deporter in chief. He deported more people than any other president had up until that time. He used the Espionage Act, a relic of the Woodrow Wilson's Palmer raid era, to prosecute journalists, people like Julian Assange and others, to prosecute whistleblowers. What did he do in this after he became president? After the Wall Street collapse, Black people lost their homes. Did he do anything to help Black people who lost their homes? No, he did not. He at the time of the protests in Ferguson, Missouri, after the killing of Mike Brown, Black Lives Matter really began to grow. He never said anything. Mm-hmm. He never did anything. He didn't use the power that he had to prosecute these killer cops. And let me just say, every year, 1,000 people are killed by police in this country. It's one Black person every day, but two not Black people every day. It's an average of 3 people every day. It's more than 1,000 a year. There's no other country that allows this kind of death count. The prison system. The US has the biggest prison system in the world. They talk about Russia or China or some authoritarian dystopian dictatorship. None of them has as many people in prison. It's 2 million, half of whom are Black, by the way. Such a large prison system, both by number of people and percentage of population incarcerated. Having said all of that, I do want to talk about the importance of organizing, and another organization that I'm a part of, the Black Alliance for Peace, blackallianceforpeace.com. Principles of unity are anti-imperialism, anti-capitalism, and amplification of the Black radical tradition, which is something that Black people always led. So I urge those who are like-minded and feel comfortable with our principles of unity to check out blackallianceforpeace.com. We founded in 2017 and are hard at work around the country. So I just want to say organizations, joining an organization, working with other people is one of the ways, an important way of addressing many of the issues that we've been talking about.
I had one final question before we depart today, and then I'll get my audience, because I have a very curious audience. If they had a question or a comment, what would be the quickest way to reach you? Your book, Prejudential, again, I'm going to keep promoting. I promoted it on a lot of the episodes, and I love reading books. I mean, I'm a book critic. That's what I do, I guess, on the side now, technically, because I'm not really in academia right now, but I still find excuses to read as much as I can. I've read more now than I have in my whole PhD program, probably this last year and a half or so, 2 years. But Prejudential is such an important book, and I'm going to link it in the episode description. But there was a figure that wasn't mentioned because he wasn't president at the time, and that's Joseph Robinette Biden, Joe Biden, Jim Crow Joe. You could probably come up with another presidential book by itself just with him. I mean, I don't, because you included all of the preceding presidents, but I'm just saying with him, you could probably just dedicate a book to him. But I know my audience is like, oh gosh, Kiko doesn't like him. You damn right I don't. But what would that chapter look like in comparison to some of the other chapters in your original publishing of Prejudential?
Well, we have to talk about his entire political career. He was the point person against school busing, when school busing as a method of desegregating schools was the hot issue. He was the Democratic Party front person who made comments like, I don't want my kids to be in a racial jungle. Donald Trump didn't say that. Joe Biden did. Joe Biden was bragged about the role he played in Clinton passing Clinton's crime bill in the 90s when he was in the Senate. He was the chair of Judiciary Committee, and he would brag about this bill that put so many Black people in jail. He said once, we do everything except have the death penalty for jaywalking in this bill. The man who told the corn pop story, how he had a fight with a young Black man when he was a lifeguard at a pool. I mean, why would you tell that story at all for any reason? So that's Jim Crow Joe Biden. Now he's genocide Joe Biden. And he was chosen by Obama because he was a right-wing Democrat. That's why he was chosen. So people say, well, he was, first of all, Obama was not progressive, as we've said, but he had this image of being a progressive, and that's why he needed someone who had had his bona fides as a conservative Democrat. That's how he was chosen. That is what I would talk, and that's just before he became president. And then after he was elected, about a month later, he had a conversation with Black people described as civil rights leaders. And he was so rude to them. Someone leaked the video, and we have to thank that person. He was rude. He was belittling. He yelled at people. That sums up how Joe Biden sees Black people. So those are the things I would talk about. And then all I need is to sell more books, and then we can come out with a new chapter. So people need to buy Prejudential Black America and the President.
And I will link that book at the end of the episode description. That video that you just cited with people like Ed Gordon, people in the radio industry, just different Black people. Do you have access to that full video, like the leaked video? I don't think I've ever actually even seen the video. I've seen like a clip, and that's it.
Oh, I think it's on YouTube. You can
Really?
find it. Yeah, I wrote about it, and I can't remember the name of my column. Sorry, I would tell you, but I will look for it, and I'll send you the link so you can share it with other folks.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that's on your mind before we go today? I think that's all I have as far as questions. We covered a lot today.
Yeah.
And I don't want to start too much because I know we got some practice. I have another interview after this one. But is there anything else that's on your mind or any other final?
Sure. I just want to tell people that Wednesday is Black Agenda Report Day, blackagendareport.com. You can see all our interviews. On Friday, we have Black Agenda Radio interviews. We're on Twitter. BLK Agenda Report is our handle. I'm on Twitter, Freedom Ride Blog. I wish I'd chosen a different name, but anyway, I'm stuck with it. Freedom Ride Blog. That's my handle on Twitter. I also have a Patreon. So always read Black Agenda Report, and yeah, that's the best way to reach me and to find out what we're doing. So, and I tweet quite a lot, probably too much. I probably spend too much time on Twitter. Although it's X now, I guess I should start calling it X, posting on the X platform. But blackagendareport.com every week. That's very important.
Since you mentioned Black Agenda Report, is that up and running now? Because there was a period of time where something was happening. Is the website like
Oh, it's
functioning?
fine. Yeah, we're good. We're up and running. We had an interesting problem. We had a web host in India which ran afoul of the Indian government, and their offices were closed, their servers were seized. So we missed an episode, and I'm sorry, an issue the first week in October, but we've been up every week since. So blackagendareport.com, you can see everything what we've been doing since.
So, audience, beautiful people, we have a lot to take into consideration. I'm going to link a bunch of stuff at the end of this episode description. This episode will release tomorrow. I recently got a second job, and so I'm going to dedicate just as much time to the podcasting, but I just want to say that this episode will release tomorrow on Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum YouTube channel. I've scrapped all the audio platforms. I don't know if people noticed or not, because YouTube is where it's at.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I passed all the checkpoints, you know, of the YouTube police and the Google police because they're the same company. And so hopefully, um, if I grow a lot more, they don't start to shadow ban me and blackball and everything else. Which I mean, they probably are. A lot of these independent channels would have a lot more subscribers, I think, if it wasn't for the algorithm, and
Mhm.
which is something that Glenn mentioned in the Black Agenda. And all this stuff, I mean, you have to read it. The Black Agenda, Prejudential, Black American the Presidents. Please buy these books, support independent media, support independent minds. That's what we need. We just don't need people saying great things like, oh gosh, that's a cool thought. That's a good part. Well, show how good those people are and support those ideas and stop supporting this mainstream media crap. I mean, it's going to be there anyway, but we really got to build from the outside because people are obviously supporting mainstream media. Otherwise, it wouldn't be around. So we got to, you know, really support independent voices. It doesn't cost you a dime at all to do that. So I'm going to plug in again, subscribe for free to my platform. You need to check out Black Agenda Report, Black Agenda Radio, and all of Margaret Kimberley's publications. She's published so many columns and articles over the years. And so we got to support like this work that's coming out pretty much weekly at this point. Have a great day. We have Spike Cohen on deck next, and we have a lot of people coming up. 25 interviews between now and February. And I must say, since Margaret's on here, that the person who judged Black Agenda Report as far left and persuasive, selective bits of information, I'm actually going to interview the inventor of the media bias chart, Vanessa Otero, next week. And so I'm very happy that she agreed to come on. It should be a very interesting interview because I've already had several exchanges with her people. Good, not arguments per se, but I gave some critiques, and that says a lot that they were willing to respond to a lot of my criticism. And so we're actually going to have the president um, of I'm trying to think what's the name of her company, but she's the creator of the media bias chart. I have just lots of questions about that, and Black Agenda Report was listed on that media bias chart, so I think it's noteworthy to mention that since Margaret is on camera here. But have a nice day and cheers.
Well, let me say one thing. You know, our tagline is news and analysis from a Black left perspective. So we plead guilty to being on the left. So anyway, that sounds like it will be interesting. Thank you so much, Kiko. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely, wonderfully put. Like I said, I'm curious about what she's going to say on that episode because I just a lot of the people that I respect and follow, I'm just like, how can you justify these people being more objective journalistically than these people? I don't know, but hopefully we'll get some satisfying answers from her this upcoming week. Have a great day, people. Cheers.